Hello, truth seekers. My name is Dr. John DeLynn. Some of the questions we're going to tackle today include what does a pirate, specifically the pirate Captain Kidd, have to do with Joseph Smith and the creation of the Book of Mormon and the founding of Mormonism? Secondly, we're going to talk about, did Joseph Smith and his family directly engage in treasure digging?
Now, I totally applaud John DeLynn in his efforts to discover truth about Mormonism. However, there is one thing very consistent about John DeLynn, is he never does any original research. He only repeats what he's been told time after time after time. And what he uses as his resource is that bogus, hoax-filled book called Mormonism Unveiled by Eber, D. Howe, Campbellite, spiritualist, and theosophist, published in 1834, which modern-day theosophists claim to be Satanism. Or in the words of Albert Pike and Madame Blavatsky, Luciferianism. Eber D. Howe uses the full name of Philetus Hurlbut to gather all these old dusty affidavits done by neighbors, in fact by a Mr. Ingersoll. Mr. Ingersoll, who could that be? Oh, that's right, Tammany Hall fraud, James C. Ingersoll, the family that was on the run, complete crooks. And John DeLynn, bless his heart, uses, and I do have some softness in my heart for Eber D. Howe, but of course that was 1832. There's been a lot of research done since then. And let's catch John DeLynn and his alma mater, Utah State University, and oh yes, Salt Lake, up to more modern research. So I found a website which is a collection of Eber D. Howe's letters and correspondence and his autobiography, and then also the Pennsville Examiner, which tells a slightly different story than what was originally contained in Mormonism Unveiled. The website is dedicated, or it's called the Spalding Manuscripts. But let's turn to that right now, and let me show you, and I'll leave a citation, but what it discloses is very interesting. Nearly 50 years after the publication of Mormonism Unveiled, that was published in 1834, E.B. Howe admits to several interviewers and in several questionnaires and several letters the following: that the Hale affidavits may indeed be a forgery, because E.B. Howe wrote Isaac Hale personally and asked him to verify the authenticity of the affidavit that Mr. Hurlbut had given him, supposedly written by Isaac Hale. Isaac Hale did not verify that he wrote it. In fact, he, through the Mormon leadership, said it was an absolute forgery because Isaac Hale and his family, Emma Smith, were loyal Mormons. Second, E.B. Howe admits the Spalding manuscript he used in Mormonism Unveiled really had nothing to do with the story of the Book of Mormon, but rather the manuscript that Mr. Hurlbut provided him had only to deal with the Indian wars on the Great Lakes among the Winnebagos and other tribes, had absolutely nothing to do with the Book of Mormon, wasn't written in any kind of ancient languages, and had nothing to do with the angel Moroni and etc. E.B. Howe admits, upon questioning, that Hurlbut was not a reliable source, and basically he was not to be trusted. This was a reasonable conclusion of E.B. Howe after he had received never-ending criticism for, number one, the Spalding manuscript that he could not produce or show anybody, and in fact he claims that it had burned or he had lost it, but he did state that it had nothing to do with the Book of Mormon. So when he was asked about why he included it, he gave a vague answer that, well, why not? And then secondly, he did admit that, or was suspicious that at least the Hale affidavit was a forgery because he wrote Isaac Hale to request confirmation, and two, that the Ingersoll affidavit, as found by Steve Benson in his criticism of it, appears to be somewhat partially a forgery, that the information in the Ingersoll affidavit could not have been known by the quote-unquote Ingersoll. So my question is, which any attorney would ask, If Hurlbut would forge these documents, well, a jury could reasonably conclude that all the affidavits are suspect and could well have been forged by Hurlbut. So, as a reliable source, no. Number one, the affidavits are hearsay. They're just observations of gossip and innuendo, and in fact, the claims that the Smith and Mack families were a shiftless group of miscreants with no visible means of support except for treasure digging is completely false, as I will later show you in Wikipedia. The Mack and Smith family were highly educated, influential, well-respected families that were leading a religious movement that was dedicated to creating laws that would outlaw slavery. Now, many of the Hurlbut imposters, like the Campbellites, claimed that they were anti-slavery, but they were in fact pro-slavery. They were falsely representing themselves in order to infiltrate and destroy legitimate anti-slavery movements such as the Mormons. It appears extremely convenient that E.B. Howe could never produce the Spalding manuscript, even though he did admit the Spalding manuscript had nothing, no similarity, no connection to the Book of Mormon, even though he had previously claimed it did in Mormonism Unveiled. So the question is, or what should be asked by everyone, is if E.B. Howe would color the facts and lie previously, why wouldn't he? How can you ever rely on it? And with all these flaws in Mormonism Unveiled, why are the purported experts such as Michael Quinn, and now John Dillon, claiming and relying on such an unreliable source? It's like, let's do some deep research on the Joseph Smith family to find out what the truth is. And we know we don't even need to look farther than Wikipedia. So my admonishment to all Mormon quote-unquote scholars, and I've gotten some flack from other channels saying, oh, you use Wikipedia as your source. Well, of course I do. Of course I do. When it's got more relevant, pertinent, and truthful research than what the Eber D. Howes in the 1832 Campbellite Theosophists and, Painesville, Ohio, a hotbed of underground polygamy. All right? These were where the Campbellites were. These were where the Cochranites were. These were where every crook on the U.S. soil resided, in other words, to infiltrate, to see it, steal the money, steal the good reputation, steal everything from legitimate U.S. citizens who were patriots. So let's go forward and see. Let's do some deep research in Wikipedia and find out the background of the Smith and the Mack families. Here's the Wikipedia entry for John Smith. This is the great uncle to Joseph Smith Jr. Joseph Smith Jr.'s father was Isaiah Smith, and John Smith and Isaiah Smith were brothers. Well, John Smith was very notable in United States history as being a professor at Dartmouth College and the author of the first unpointed Hebrew grammar book published in the United States. Smith was born in Byfield, Massachusetts. After graduating from Dartmouth, he moved to West Hartford, Connecticut, and became a pastor. Let's go on down here. John Smith's early interest in Greek and Latin. He soon proceeded to be the master in Hebrew, Chaldaic, Aramaic, and other Oriental languages. In 1780, he prepared an interesting set of lectures on natural philosophy, covered Newtonian astronomy and earth sciences, in which he speculated on the possibility of multiple peopled worlds and the origin of the Indians. These lectures seem to have stimulated his students, Solomon Spalding and Ethan Smith, for further speculation on the subject, as well as Joseph Smith, his grandson, who further speculated on this. This is my commentary, and it is my belief that the Book of Mormon was written as a historical, fictional rendition in regard to the peopling of the North American continent, which many of these people were were speculating on. And Solomon Spaulding did inspire Joseph Smith because Solomon Spaulding was attending Dartmouth during the same period of time as Hiram Smith attending Moore's Indian School, a prep school for at Dartmouth College, specifically for interracial Native Americans. Now, many people say that at this point in time, that Moore's College or Moore's prep school started accepting non-Native American. That's not quite true. They accepted interracial Native Americans whose fathers were white and mothers were Native American, which Stephen Mack, Hiram Smith's cousin, had a white father, Stephen Mack, and his full-blooded Native American Hononega was married to him. But Stephen Mack was considered white because he came from a white father. Stephen Mack married Hononega specifically so his 3 offspring would be considered white and his inheritance would be handled by New England British American law. But anyway, let's go on. In 1779, Joseph Smith's grandfather, was appointed the librarian, and afterwards, in the late 1790s and 19th century, Joseph Smith's great uncle, prepared a remarkable set of theological lectures that covered various aspects and details of the Arminian free will non-Calvinist thinking. And this was the fact that Arminians believed that everyone could be saved as long as they took on the name of Christ, and Calvinist thinkers thought there was only a few elect and everyone else was damned. So the Arminian Christianity was considered a more liberal or progressive thinking Christianity. So all of these published grammars and unpublished lectures and grammars can be found in the Roner Special Collections at Dartmouth. This is Joseph Smith's great uncle, his grandfather's brother. His theological work was so appreciated by the Free Will Baptists at Brown that he was granted the Doctor of Divinity degree in 1803. He was in his final stages of preparing his theological lectures for publication in 1809 when he died. His work generally anticipated the efforts of Joseph Smith, his grandson, grandnephew's development of the Mormon doctrine. Do you see how relying on a old holograph written by Heber C. Howe, Heber D. Howe, a known theosophist, spiritualist, and, according to modern day interpreters, a Satanist. Theosophy, Madame Blavatsky, and theosophy is considered equal to being the Satanist philosophy. So we have John Dehlin and all these ex-Mormon critics relying on old, inaccurate documents and refusing to go into the 21st century and simply do some deep research. Oh yes, we considered Wikipedia deep research. Well, if you want to rely on John Dehlin, I guess Joseph Smith's Wikipedia entry is considered deep research. So let's do some more deep research in Wikipedia. This is an entry for Stephen Mack. Stephen Mack was Lucy Mack's brother. Now, Stephen Mack was a very influential historical figure. He was born in 1766 and died in November 1826, was an American merchant, patriot, politician. He was a member of the founding company of Pontiac, Michigan, and represented Oakland County in the first Michigan Territorial Council of 1824. He was the brother of Lucy Mack Smith, and so the uncle of Joseph Smith, founder of the Latter-day Saint movement. Stephen Mack was born in New Hampshire to Solomon Mack, and that's Joseph Smith's great-grandfather, Solomon Mack, and Lydia Gates. And Solomon Mack was a Sephardic Jewish family that was indentured as indentured servants until he was about 21, which formed the basis of their lifelong fight against slavery. Joseph Smith Jr. and Lucy Mack Jr. and Joseph Smith Sr.'s religion, called the Mormon religion, was a religious movement that was fighting slavery in pro-slavery states such as Missouri, and they gave their lives to it. Joseph Smith, Solomon Mack, could be called anti-slavery heroes, and they should be regarded as such as soon as we repair all the damage the Utah Mormon Church has done to the good name of the Smith and Mack families, and continued by Utah State University graduates such as John DeLynn in their promotion of the fake Joseph Smith history. And now they seem desperate. The last video of John DeLynn, in which he tries to use the old hackney, inaccurate, apocryphal history of Eber D. Howe, is just a last desperate attempt to try and recapture their slander and promote the slander of an anti-slavery hero, because the Utah Mormon Church were pro-slavery, pro-Britain, and pro-South. And they fought against the United States during the War of 1812 and on the side of Canada and the United States. They were Southerners who wanted to secede and were loyal to Britain. And the Joseph Smith Jr. family all fought on the side of the Union, and the Campbellites and the Brighamites all fought on the side or promoted or supported pro-slavery South. And we know that Brigham Young went out to Utah and made it a slave state. He also supported the Mexican-American War, so Texas would become a slave state. These were pro-slavers who have continued to tarnish the name of Joseph Smith.